Hey folks, I want to thank you for watching this video. I know most of you found this video through the Wild Sheep Foundation and what they call Sheep Week, where they've asked me to do a summary or an overview of the very first step it takes if you want to go sheep hunting or if you want to go hunting in most of the western states. And that is acquiring a tag. And when you say acquire a tag, that sounds pretty simple. It's like, well, you know, in a lot of states, you just go down to the sporting goods store and you say, hey, I need a deer tag. Well, not in the West. The Rocky Mountain states, pretty much even all the western states, the coastal states, Alaska, they've come up with some pretty elaborate schemes as to how they allocate their tags to non-residents. Every state is different. They all have different deadlines, different rules, different systems. And the purpose of this video is to go over those in a brief manner and give you the highlights so you know, all right, if I want to go hunt in Alaska or I want to go hunt in Arizona or whatever, here's what I need to know. So when I do this, this is my 30 years of applying in multiple states. Some of it is going to be my impressions and my opinion about the value of where you're going to invest your money and what you're going to get out of that. I'm going to talk about what are short-term plans, mid-term plans, and long-term plans. I'm going to talk about how you plan this stuff so that you have a short-term plan to go hunting while building points for mid and long-term plans. And for me, a short-term plan is 1 to 4 years. Mid-term is 5 to 9 years. A long-term plan is, all right, I want to go do that sometime in the next 10 to 20 years. That's what we're going to cover here. We're going to go through how the details of that state works. And when we're all done, hopefully at least you're a little bit familiar with it. A lot of people, one of their very first surprises is how hard it is to follow all these rules just to do the first step. And that first step is to get a tag. So understand that if you're here looking just for sheep information, these rules apply to the sheep, whether it's Rocky Mountain Bighorn or Desert Bighorn or California Bighorn. But the opportunities in all the Rocky Mountain states are really slim. We're not going to cover Canada or Mexico, where you just go meet with the outfitter and you work out an agreement, negotiate a price, and off you go. Because you don't have to draw tags in those two countries. And that's where a lot of the sheep hunting happens. Here in the US, we allocate these sheep tags through drawings. And someone's going to raise their hand and say, well, what about Montana? Montana has unlimited bighorn sheep tags. Yes, my home state of Montana, where I'm sitting right here, we do have an unlimited sheep tag available in some units. You're guaranteed to draw it. It's somewhat expensive as a non-resident. And it's the toughest hunt in the lower 48. And they're all quota tags, so as quick as the quota fills, season closes. So I'm not going to get into that either. Just know that there are some places that if you want to work really hard or you want to pay the fee, you can go sheep hunting. But there's a whole lot of other species that some of you who are here came through the sheep show. Maybe this is your first time exposed to this. We're going to talk about these other things also. Because if you're applying for sheep in some of these states, you may as well apply for the other stuff, because you're going to find out through this video that a lot of times there's some sunk costs, some upfront costs. And the way to get the most value out of that is apply for the other species. The states that I'm going to talk about are Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. And some of you are going to say, well, what about California? What about Oregon? What about Washington? Yep, those states have their unique rules also. But back when I said that some of this is my personal opinion, I don't think there's a lot of value in applying in those states. We're going to stick mostly to the Rocky Mountain states plus Alaska. So I'm going through my outline here. And the very first thing that pops up is systems, point systems. You hear this all the time, right? They have this point system or that point system. There's really 4 types of point systems. There's a preference point system, a bonus point system, a hybrid of some of these mixes, and then there's just the random draw. There is no two states that are identical, none. So that's why we have to go through every one of these states and give you an overview, so at least you get a feel for, oh man, that's weird, I don't want to do that. Or, hey, I'm new to the system and I'm going to be so far behind on the point system, it's not even worth going to that state. I'm going to focus on a different state. So let's talk about what a preference point system is. A preference point system is where the person or the applicant with the most points gets the tag. So if you have 10 points and I have 4 points, you're going to get a tag way sooner than I am. And I'll just use an example. There's 3 tags. One of them goes to the applicant with 10 points. The next 2 tags, there's 2 applicants with 9 points. So the 3 tags to non-residents, they're gone. All the other people with less than 9 points don't get a tag this year. So they start at the top of the list. The person with the most points gets a tag. And then the next person and the next person, and they work their way down till the total allocation of non-resident tags is spoken for, and everyone else is unsuccessful. That's how a preference point system works. He or she with the most points gets the tag. Then you'll hear states talk about, oh, we have a bonus point system. Well, a bonus point system is really like a raffle. You buy 10 raffle tags and I buy 1, you've got way better odds that one of your 10 tickets is going to get pulled and win the raffle. I only have 1, so I've got about 1/10 of the chance you have. So a bonus point system, everybody has a possibility of drawing that year because it's a raffle. But it weights the system by giving some people, or every person, more points for each year that they're unsuccessful. And if you go in with 10 points, using the same example I did with preference points, you go in with 10 points, I go in with 4 points. You got a way better chance that one of your 10 random numbers is going to be lower than one of my 4 random numbers. So that's how a bonus point system works. Now, there are some states that take a bonus point system and complicate it even further. And they square your bonus points. And well, what's that mean? Well, let's use the 10 and 4 example again. You have 10 points. They square your 10, so 10 times 10 is 100, plus you get 1 point for the current year application. So you have 101 random numbers assigned to you. I've got 4 points. So 4 times 4 is 16 plus my current year application. That gives me 17 random numbers. So for every point you have, you get assigned a random number. And so they look at your 101 random numbers and they say, what's the lowest random number of all those? That's the number you're assigned in the draw. And they look at my 17 points, for which I get a random number for each of them. And they take my lowest random number, and that's the random number I go into the draw with. And then they start with the lowest random numbers and say, all right, here's the lowest one. What's your first choice? Yep, you get a tag. So the point of that illustration is that as a first-time applicant, you still could luck out and get a really low random number. And you might be one of those really unlucky people that year where your 10 points, none of them result in a low random number. So the third system is a random system. That's just every year you go into the draw the same as I do, whether you've been applying for 10 years and this is my first year, there are no points. So some people argue that's the fairest system of all, that every year we all have the same chance. So that's a completely random system. So you take preference point systems, bonus point systems, and a random system, and sometimes some states do a mix of those 3, and they come up with what we call hybrid draws. And that might be some of the tags, some certain portion. I'll use Wyoming, for example. 25% of their tags go on a random draw and 75% go on a preference point. Just understand you're either going to have preference, where the person with the most points wins, or you're going to have a bonus, which is like a raffle, or you're going to have completely random, are you going to have a mix of those? So before we get into all these states and all these details, there are a couple shortcuts that if you're the lucky person, you might be able to draw a sheep tag or a goat tag or some really good hunt. And you go to the Wild Sheep Foundation Sheep Week platform that probably brought you into this video. And they are selling raffle tickets for all kinds of amazing hunts. I mean, like unbelievable hunts. And if you go there, you buy one of those tickets, who knows, you might be the lucky winner. Every year it seems like I know somebody who wins one of those hunts. And then states also have similar systems. They call them super tags or stuff like that. Each state on their website, you can go and buy some of those tags. And usually those tags on the state level let you hunt any unit in the state for the whole season. So that's another option that you have available to you. Now that I've explained the 4 systems, the preference, bonus, hybrid, or random, I'm going to talk about some of the other things you need to think of as you're allocating your money. Because very few of us have unlimited budgets. We have to think about which state gives us the most return for our investment, how much is that upfront non-refundable investment, and what's our priority? Do you want to hunt sheep? Do you want to hunt elk, antelope, mule deer? What is it? Because each state is going to have a different value proposition for you based on what your interest is. One of the things you need to think about is the upfront costs. A lot of the states require you to pay and purchase a hunting license just to apply. You have to buy a non-resident hunting license. Well, that can be a pretty big cost. Some states it's, $60, $70. Some states it's $180. That's like just the cover charge to get into the game. And then each state usually has a non-refundable application fee, which I think some states it's $5, some states it's as high as $25. And then some states that require you to do all this online, which they pretty much all do, they're now charging merchant fees to cover the credit card fee that they get dinged on the other end. Some of these you're going to have some pretty big investments in non-refundable costs. The upfront license, the application fee, and your merchant fee or credit card fee. When you add those up, some of them you might look at it and say, well, I'm going to invest that much up front and I'm not going to get anything for it other than one raffle ticket? Nah, not interested. I'll allocate my money somewhere else. So be thinking about what it's going to cost you as an upfront cost when you jump into these systems and get the most out of your money. So some of these states where you have to buy these upfront licenses, they have some other things you can go and do to get more value out of that license. Like Colorado, okay, you got to buy a small upfront license, I think it's $80. But if you don't draw one of the limited entry tags, you can come back and over-the-counter elk hunt. Or Arizona, all right, you don't draw one of their tags, but you can come and hunt small game. They have some over-the-counter archery deer hunts. So depending on what your other interests are, what I think is a great value might be different than what you think is a great value because we have different interests of the other things that we can do with that upfront license that we make an investment in. Real quickly, here are the states that require an upfront investment. Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah. That's that's pretty much all of them. Wyoming doesn't require to buy an upfront license. Montana makes you buy a conservation stamp or conservation license. But these ones I just rattled off are some pretty big upfront investments. And then we get into this thing called the Non-Resident Allocation Cap. So what does that mean? Well, in the Rocky Mountain states, they say we're going to allocate no more than some percentage to non-residents. In some states, they'll give a different percentage of the moose, goat, and sheep tags and a different percentage of the elk, deer, and antelope tags. So it's a bit all over the map. None of the states are the same, or most of them have their own levels and limits. But just understand that each of these states are going to have an allocation for non-residents. Some states will allocate to and say, we are setting aside a pool of tags for non-residents, that only non-residents can apply for this. Yeah, it's a small percentage of the total tags, but we know non-residents are going to get this many tags. And then some states, like Idaho, Arizona, and Montana, say, you non-residents, you can get up to 10% of the tags, but you're competing with the residents for those tags. So if there's a lot of resident demand, the non-residents might only get 4% or 7%. They might not reach that 10% cap. So there are these caps, and some states are very generous. Colorado and Wyoming are the most generous to non-residents. One of the reasons that Oregon is not on this list is they're the least accommodating, them in California, to non-residents in terms of the percentage of tags they allocate. Here's probably the biggest stumbling block for most people. It's these deadlines. And we'll go through the general deadlines and all this, but so often people miss the deadline. It's like, well, I didn't know that there was a deadline. I want to go hunting in September. Why do I have to apply in January? Well, because that's what the state has as their deadlines. And some of them are so early, like Alaska. Alaska's deadline for, let's use this year that I'm doing this video. We're thinking about the hunts in the fall of 2021. Well, the deadline for the Alaska limited entry draws was December 15th of 2020. So even though those hunts in 2021 are still 6, 8, 9 months away, the deadline is in the rearview mirror by a month already. So Alaska has the earliest deadline, and then Arizona and Idaho have the latest deadlines of sometime in May and June, and then every other state is somewhere in between there. The heavy period of these application deadlines is January, February, March, and April. That's the majority of them. But you can't miss these deadlines. So you're probably right now getting the feel that, man, this is going to be complex. There's all these different variables. Every state's different. Yes, they are. The very first thing you want to do, whatever state interests you, go to their website, and on their website they'll have these pamphlets or booklets. Some call them regulations, some call them proclamations. Download those regulations, look at them, get a feel for how it works. And as much as I'm going to do a summary overview of every state here, there are software systems out there or platforms out there that go into super, super detail in all this stuff. And I'll tell you the one that I use. I use a platform called the Go Hunt Insider. It takes all those regulations, all those proclamations from all these Western states and puts it right there in one place, right at your fingertips. All kinds of stuff there, drawing odds and everything else. So that's another option. If you want to go there, go to a service like that. And for the Sheep Show, if you use promo code Randy when you sign up, they're going to give you a $50 gift card for their service, just for being here. And with those basics covered, some of you are probably already saying, what do you mean basics? We're already pretty deep into this. Those are the basics. So it's going to get even more complicated as we go forward. And I'm going to cover all those states I listed, and I'm going to do them in alphabetical order. It's just easier to do it that way. But these basics that I gave, I would say the most important one is the deadline. Don't miss the deadline. And in your own little prioritization, think about what your budget is in terms of your money and your time. And when you're investing that budget, that money, think about which state gives you the greatest return. Let's start with Alaska. Not only is it first in the alphabetical list, it's the easiest one to explain, because Alaska does not have a point system. It's a random draw. Whew. Finally, a few states that have just random, none of this other stuff, preference, bonus, hybrid, none of that. Alaska has a random system where every year we all go into the draw with the same odds. Now, as a non-resident, we need to understand that Alaska is one of those states where we get up to 10% of the tags. We're competing with the residents in most instances for tags. The beauty of Alaska is a lot of these hunts, a lot of their best hunts are general tags. And by a general tag, what I mean by that is you don't even have to go through one of these elaborate drawing, limited entry, throw your name in the hat. A lot of their really good moose hunting, some of their caribou hunting, a lot of this stuff in Alaska are general tags. And by a general tag, you can go to their website, log in, buy your non-refundable license, and then buy your tag. In Alaska, sometimes they call it a harvest ticket, sometimes they call it a locking tag. Go read the regulations. I'm not going to get into the details of all that, but in its general terms, we'll call it a license and then a tag. And there's some amazing hunts available in Alaska. Now, when you think about Alaska, there's one rule you need to understand is to hunt for Dall sheep, mountain goats, or I call them the big bears, brown bear or grizzly bear. You need to hire the services of an outfitter. You have to have that in place before you even apply. Or if you're lucky enough to have a family member there that meets the rules of second kindred, and you got to look up what that means under Alaska law, you can hunt with a relative or a family member of second kindred in lieu of hiring an outfitter. So those three species, sheep, goat, and the big bears, you probably are going to be thinking about hiring an outfitter. Alaska has the earliest deadline. It's in December. You do have to buy your upfront Alaska hunting license, which is a pretty good chunk of money. You have to pay an application fee. And they have this really quirky thing in Alaska where you can buy 6 applications for the same hunt, up to 6. So if there's a hunt I really want, I don't just buy 1 application for it, I buy 6. And it's kind of weird. It's like, really? Yeah, really. Alaska has a ton of species available to non-residents. Like we said, the big bears, mountain goats, and the Dall sheep, you're hiring an outfitter. Black bear, no outfitter required. Moose, no outfitter required. Caribou, no outfitter required. You have Sitka blacktail. There are no limited entry Sitka blacktail hunts. They're all general hunts. You have Roosevelt elk, and you probably have some species, muskox, bison. Alaska has an amazing variety of species that you can go and hunt. Download their proclamation. They call it a draw supplement. It's on their website. And when the draw comes around next December, be thinking about it. There's some amazing hunting in Alaska, and there are millions and millions and millions of acres of public land. So now we've covered Alaska. Next in line alphabetically is Arizona. This is the first state we're going to talk about that has a really complicated system for how they allocate their non-resident tags. Arizona says they're one of those states that say you non-residents can get up to 10% of the tags. Once the 10% limit is met for that hunt code, no more non-resident tags. So knowing that that 10% cap exists, here's how Arizona does their system. They have 2 parts to the draw. They have what's called the bonus pass, and then they call it the 1-2 pass. I call it the first phase and the second phase. Call it whatever you want, but if you download the Arizona regulations and read this, hopefully my 1 paragraph here summarizes multiple pages in their regulations. So it's a hybrid system. 20% of the tags are set in this pool that says the folks with the highest number of bonus points. So Arizona likes to think they have a bonus point system, and they do. But for 20% of the tags, the very first part of their draw, the bonus pass, phase 1, whatever you call it, the person with the highest points gets the tag. So if there's let's say a hunt code that has 50 tags. They take 20% of that, or 10 of those tags, and they go in this first draw. And the folks with the highest points who've applied for that hunt code are the ones who those 10 tags are going to be allocated to. Once that part of the draw is done, everybody else goes over and we all get to compete for the 80% that's left. And that's called the 1-2 pass, or the phase 2, whatever part you want to call it. And that is a true bonus point system, where if you have 10 points and I have 4 points, you got way better odds of drawing one of those tags than I do, because you get 10 raffle tickets, I get 4 raffle tickets. So 20% is based on the max, like the highest point holders. 80% is a bonus point system. That's why we call Arizona one of the hybrid systems. Now back to that 10% non-resident cap that I told you about. Well, in this first part of the draw, no more than half of that non-resident cap can be met when we give the tags to the highest point holders. That leaves at least half of the non-resident cap over here when we go through the second part of the draw. It's a true raffle bonus point system that we use for that other 5%. So 5% of the non-residents of the tags can go to non-residents here, and 5% over here, getting to the 10% total cap. Arizona staggers their deadlines depending on the species you're interested in. For elk and antelope, the deadline is usually early February. Then they go to deer and sheep, which is usually in early June. And then in the fall, they have another deadline for turkey, javelina, and maybe even some of the bison. I can't remember when the bison rolls into that, but bison's really expensive in Arizona, and the odds are really, really slim. So Arizona, you're paying an upfront license cost of $160. And you're paying an application fee for each of the applications that you want to be a part of $15. Now Arizona has this situation where they look at your first 2 choices. You can do even more choices than that, but they look at the first 2 before they go on to the next person. So when your random number comes up, they say, oh, you're now next in line. Are there any tags left for your first choice? Nope. Are there any tags left for your second choice? Maybe. If there are, you get a tag. But say there's none for your first choice, none for your second choice, you're done. You're out of the draw for that species, and you get a preference point towards or a bonus point towards next year. So every year you're getting these extra points. Now Arizona has 2 quirks where they have what's called a loyalty point. So for any species where you've applied for 5 consecutive years, they give you a loyalty point. But if ever you fall out and forget, you lose that loyalty point and you got to start a new 5-year period. And if you go there and take their non-resident hunter education class, they'll give you a permanent bonus point. So there's a lot of ways to build points in Arizona. Arizona has multiple species that you can apply for. And this is why there's a lot of value in the upfront investment with Arizona. They have cows, or Coues whitetail, the little, really small little whitetails. They're well known for their elk hunting. They're well known for their desert sheep hunting. They have some of the best mule deer hunts in all of North America. They don't give away a lot of antelope tags, but if you get one, it's really, really good. In addition to the desert sheep I mentioned, they do have some Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. They have bison. They have black bear. I'm probably forgetting javelina. Arizona has a lot of species to hunt. Arizona is not all desert like you think it is. If you've not been there, go to some of the high mountain country. It's amazing, amazing hunting there. And lots of public land. Pretty much all these states I'm going to talk about have a lot of public land. Arizona has a very high percentage. So that's the summary of Arizona. So Colorado. Colorado can be ridiculously complex depending on what species you want to apply for. I'm going to start with the easy species: elk, deer, and antelope. Elk and deer and antelope are on a true preference point system. Colorado was the first state to start a point system, and they went with a preference point system. The applicant with the most points gets the tag. Then they said, well, we've got these Shiras moose, Rocky Mountain goat, and Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. Let's do a different system for that. And I'm going to try to explain it as best I can, but you'll want to read the regulations. The point system for those three species of Shiras moose, Rocky Mountain goat, and Rocky Mountain bighorns is complicated. So the very first thing they tell you is you have to buy a preference point for 3 consecutive years. So until you've met your preference point for 3 consecutive years, you're not even in the draw. You're just buying a point, buying a point, buying a point. And why they call it preference points, I'm really not sure. Because in your 4th year, when you finally get in the draw for those 3 species, they have this formula. They call it a weighted point system. It's somewhat random. It's somewhat based on how many points you have, both your preference points and your weighted points, and it comes up with this random number you get, and it divides it by some other stuff and adds 1. And when you read it in the regulations, you're like, who came up with this? Point is, you're not even in the draw in Colorado until your 4th year for moose, goat, and sheep. Now I say all that, they have some desert bighorn units in Colorado that are exempt from all these point systems. So deer, elk, and antelope, you got a true preference point system. What we call often the big 3 here is moose, goat, and sheep. You have this weighted point system, and desert bighorn, you don't have a point system at all. Now Colorado is very generous to us non-residents. They give a very large percentage of the tags to non-residents, and it fluctuates, depends on the unit and the species. I think in some units, for some species, it's as high as 35%. That's really generous compared to other states that usually keep it around 10%. The deadline for all these applications in Colorado is usually early April. You go online. All these states now, you have to do it online. There's no more paper applications. You have to have a non-resident hunting license of some sort. They have a list of them, but the least expensive one is a non-resident small game license, and then there's some necessary stamps that you have to buy. When you get done adding all that up, it comes to about $93. The species that you can hunt in Colorado, like I said, you got Rocky Mountain bighorn, desert bighorn, Rocky Mountain goat, Shiras moose, elk, deer, antelope, black bear. Maybe I'm forgetting some, but there's a lot of species you can apply for in Colorado. And I tell people, once you've invested that $93 in that upfront license, the cost to buy points or to throw your name in the hat and get a point for the next year is not very much per species. It is for the big 3, moose, goat, and sheep. But for deer, elk, and antelope, it's relatively inexpensive. So you may as well apply for all 3 of them and build points for all 3 of them. So Colorado takes us then to Idaho. Idaho is almost as simple as Alaska because it's a random system, doesn't have preference points, doesn't have bonus points. But they've got some other quirks to their draw that you need to think about. And it's nice that they have a random system because you can move around without penalty. In other words, some states, if you fall behind a point because you took a year off or you just, missed a deadline or something, it's pretty punitive to drop behind 1 point. Well, Idaho doesn't have that. But it has this complication. If you want to apply for Shiras moose, Rocky Mountain goat, or Rocky Mountain bighorn, you can pick one of those 3. Moose, or goat, or sheep. But you can't do all 3 of them. And if you pick one of those 3, you cannot apply for the limited entry deer, elk, and antelope tags later in the draw cycle. So that's a little bit of a quirk where you got to kind of decide, do I want to go sheep hunting? Do I want to apply for moose? Do I want to apply for goats? Or do I want to apply for deer, elk, and antelope? So the deer, elk, and antelope are kind of like one group. You can apply for all 3 of those, but if you do that, you can't apply for moose, goat, or sheep. this system, the way Idaho does it, makes for some of the best draw odds for the moose, goat, and sheep, because you have to kind of pick what you want to do. You can't apply for all three. So as a non-resident, some of the best draw odds for, say, moose for non-residents are in Idaho, just because of how they do that system. Now, kind of like Arizona, Idaho caps the non-resident tag percentage at 10, but it doesn't guarantee 10% of the tags. You get up to 10%. So when non-residents hit their 10% cap, all the rest of the tags are going to residents. The deadlines, they stagger their deadlines, where the moose, goat, and sheep deadline is usually the end of April, and then their deer, elk, and antelope deadline is usually in early June, late May, early June. So you don't want to miss those deadlines, because you're not gonna go. The upfront costs are pretty high in Idaho. You have to buy a non-resident license to apply for any of those species I mentioned. And that non-resident license, they just bumped the price this year, is $185. So you're paying $185. For moose, goat, and sheep, you got to front all the money, which now is, I think, $2,600 or $2,700, yeah, that you have to front. For elk, deer, and antelope, you just have to pay the application fee. But for the big three, you're fronting a lot of money. And then on top of that, you're paying a credit card transaction fee. I think it's 2.5%. Maybe it's 3.5%. So to apply in Idaho, you are making a decision that I'm making a big investment in this one raffle ticket I can buy. You aren't getting any points. You aren't getting any preference or bonus benefit. It's every year standalone, and here's my $185 plus all my application fees and my transaction fees. One of the benefits of Idaho is they have a bunch of deer and elk tags that are considered general or over-the-counter tags. There's caps on them for non-residents, but if you know you're going to go there elk hunting, you're going to be buying that $185 license to go on your elk hunt. Why not throw your name in the hat for the moose or the goat or the sheep to get more value out of that upfront investment? So, the species that you can hunt in Idaho: Rocky Mountain bighorn, Rocky Mountain goat, Shiras moose, elk, mule deer, whitetail, antelope, black bear, and wolves. If you want to go wolf hunting, I can't think of a better state to go wolf hunting than Idaho. They have a lot of wolves. The tags are really inexpensive, and you can buy a whole fistful of tags if you want them. But Idaho has got some of the later deadlines, so you can use that as sort of your fallback option. You'll already have got your results from some of the other states by the time the Idaho deadlines come along. So if you haven't drawn anything, you can look to Idaho and say, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. Great hunting in Idaho, tons of public land. Now we get into Montana. And those of you who are here through the sheep portal, Wild Sheep Foundation, you're thinking Montana, land of giant bighorns, Rocky Mountain bighorns. Yeah, we have that, but we have so much more. And when I say we, I say that because I live in Montana. I'm sitting here in Montana while I'm filming this. Montana has some pretty complicated rules. I don't know, again, kind of like how Colorado evolved into some system. I don't know how Montana evolved into our system, but I'm going to start with Shiras moose, Rocky Mountain bighorn, and Rocky Mountain goat. Those are on a true bonus point system. But we had to tweak it a little bit where we square the bonus points. So you've got 10. I've got the maximum points for sheep, which I think this year is 20, 19 or 20. Let's say it's 20. Well, by the time you square my 20, that's 400. 20 times 20 means I get 400 random numbers assigned to me. Say you have 10, 10 times 10 is 100. So I get way more random numbers assigned to me than you do, even though I've only got twice as many points. So Montana says we have a bonus point system, but when we get done squaring the points, it really slants the benefit to the high point holders. Now, you non-residents are subject to a 10% cap on all species in Montana. Doesn't mean you're going to get 10%. You might only get 3% or 5% or 8%, but you're capped at no more than 10%. So if a bunch of you non-residents lucked out and got really low random numbers and right away you hit the 10% cap, all the rest of you non-residents are on the sidelines for that species, or that hunt code at least. So I've talked about how we use a bonus point system for moose, goat, and sheep. Now let's talk about this really complicated thing that we do for our deer and our elk. So non-residents have to apply and receive a general deer tag or a general elk tag. And we have you guys on a preference point system for that. So in order for you as a non-resident to apply for one of the non-resident limited entry deer or elk tags, not the general, but the limited entry, the first hurdle you have to clear is, all right, I drew my general deer or elk tag. Well, that tag is going to let you hunt the majority of the state for archery or for rifle. But if you want one of these premium tags that are highly coveted, you got to first clear that hurdle, and then you say, if I clear that hurdle, I want to be in the limited entry draw. And there you are doing this based on bonus points. So you could have a different number of preference points than what you have as bonus points. Weird, I know. And why we do it that way, I'm not sure. It's overly complicated, but it's how we do it. And then we have our antelope system, our antelope tags, which are treated kind of like the moose, goat, and sheep, where it's on a true bonus point system, and we square it. We have really good wolf hunting, really good black bear hunting. Those are over the counter. There's no draw for that. Our deadlines, so you're going to want to be paying attention, because in April is when the deadline comes for this complicated deer and elk system I talk about. And then the deadline for moose and goat and sheep is usually early May, like May 1st. So don't go to that. Get it done in April. And then in early June, we have our deadline for antelope. So there's not that much of an upfront cost in Montana. You have to buy a non-resident conservation license and some habitat stamps and stuff. When I totaled that up, I think it came to like $40. The species we have in Montana, we have Shiras moose, Rocky Mountain bighorn, Rocky Mountain goat, elk, mule deer, whitetail, antelope, black bear, and wolves, and bison. Montana has some really good hunting. One thing that surprises people when they come to Montana is 1/3 of the state is public land, the other 2/3 is private land. So a lot of times access can be an issue in Montana. We have millions and millions of acres enrolled in a program called the Block Management System, where landowners are compensated for the impacts of allowing public hunting. So between the Block Management Program, BLM lands, state land, Forest Service lands, there's a lot of places to go hunting in Montana. So we're getting through the states here. Now we're going to talk about Nevada. A lot of people think of Nevada, they think of Las Vegas or Reno. Nevada has some amazing, amazing hunting. 84% of Nevada is public land. So finding a place to hunt is not difficult. Their agency does a great job of managing this real marginal habitat for an extremely good hunting experience. And by that I mean a combination of a lot of places to hunt, not a lot of hunting pressure, and a quality age class. They manage for certain age classes and they do a great job of it. Now, Nevada has, somewhat like Montana, a bonus point system, and they square their bonus points, just like I walked through the example in Montana. If you want to apply for sheep in Nevada, they give away more desert bighorn sheep tags than probably all the other western states combined. I've got 20 points there, 21. Okay, square 20, I get 400 random numbers assigned to me. But they only give away 10% of those tags to non-residents. So we as non-residents are allocated a separate pool of tags equal to 10% of the total. So us non-residents are just competing against each other for our pool of tags. But when you start squaring the bonus points, I who have 20, I'm using sheep in this example, have a way better chance than the new person who only has 2. That person, 2 times 2 is 4, 20 times 20 is 400. It's like, man, that really skews it in favor of the long-term applicant. So it is a true bonus point system in Nevada. They square the bonus points, and every year that you're unsuccessful, you get another point. The dates for Nevada are usually, all of the species in Nevada go on the same date. And it's usually sometime in April. We get our results sometime in mid to late May. There is a pretty big upfront license cost. You're going to pay $156 for your non-resident, non-refundable license. I say non-refundable. You can get it refunded, but if you ask for it to be refunded, you don't get any points for that year. So in a state that takes your bonus points and squares them, the value of having points is pretty high. So most people don't ask for a refund of their $156. It's just, consider it a sunk cost. And because we're all fighting over or competing against each other for this 10% of tags, at least we know that we're going to get 10%, unlike Montana, Arizona, Idaho, where, well, we might get 3% or 5% or 8%, or we might hit the cap at 10%. Nevada, we get our own pool of tags. Nevada has a lot of species you can apply for. They have, like I mentioned, probably the best desert bighorn population in the world, and so you can do that. Due to die-off, non-residents can no longer apply for their Rocky Mountain bighorns. Residents can. They have the subspecies of the California bighorn that we can apply for as non-residents. They have amazing elk hunting, amazing mule deer, amazing pronghorn. Now they've even opened a black bear season over in the western side of the state. Lots and lots of great hunts in Nevada. There aren't that many tags. They don't have the habitat to support the huge numbers. So the total pool of tags is small. And 10% of that small pool means we're competing for a very small pool as non-residents. But if your budget can afford it, it's worth applying in Nevada. Once we get past Nevada, we go to New Mexico. In New Mexico, like Idaho, like Alaska, is a completely random system. They don't have a point scheme. No preference points, no bonus points. I've been applying in New Mexico for 25 years. If you jump into the New Mexico system this year, you've got the same exact odds I have, even though I've been in the system for 25 years. It's the benefit of not having a point system. It makes it simpler. But then where it gets really complicated is how New Mexico allocates their pool of tags. So they have actual pools of tags for residents, for non-residents, and then their guided pool, you can be a resident or a non-resident to go into this pool of tags specifically for outfitted hunters. So 84% of the tags go to residents, whether they're outfitted or not. 6% of the tags go to non-residents who do not use the services of a guide. So that accounts for 90% of the tags. The other 10% of the tags go into a pool for anyone who's under a contract with an outfitter. Whether you're a resident or non-resident, you have to put in the outfitter's number. And there's a pool of tags for that draw. So there's really 3 portions of their draw: the resident draw, the non-resident draw, and the outfitter draw. So a little bit more complicated than, say, some of the states that don't have that outfitter pool. But New Mexico, much like Arizona, much like Nevada, has some amazing hunting. So there's a high demand for the tags. The deadline, don't miss this, is usually in March. It's usually early March. So I tell people, plan on getting your New Mexico applications done right away in February. Just get it out of the way. Don't miss a deadline. So you're going to have an upfront investment. There's a license cost of $65. If you're successful, you're going to have to buy these 2 stamps that come to another $9. But the one thing about New Mexico is you have to front all of the application costs, which aren't that bad for deer and antelope. But when you start looking at elk, it can be almost $800. In sheep, it's over $3,000. And they give away so few sheep tags that those of us non-residents who are self-guided take 6%, which is already a small percentage, of a small number of sheep tags. And each year, the number of sheep tags that go to self-guided non-residents in New Mexico is very, very, very small. So is it worth fronting that $3,000? If you got an unlimited budget, I guess it is, but I don't do it. It's just tough, really, really tough. And there's a lot of species you can apply for. They have mule deer, they have the coos or cows, whitetails. They have some exotics in the form of oryx and ibex. They're well known for their elk and antelope hunting. Rocky Mountain bighorn, desert bighorn, black bear. I think I've covered them all. There's probably something else that I've missed, but New Mexico, if you've got the money, it's worth fronting the $65 non-refundable license and throwing your name in the hat for all these other species, or at least, whatever ones you can afford. Because if you draw a tag, the odds are you're going to have a super high quality experience in New Mexico. So now we're going to get to Utah. Utah is an interesting state. They have some really, really good hunting. Tags are hard to come by as a non-resident. They have a system that is really a hybrid system. They advertise that they have a bonus point system, and they do. But they've taken their pool of tags and they said 90% are going over here to residents and 10% over here to non-residents. So kind of like Nevada, we non-residents are competing for this pool of tags. We're guaranteed we're getting that 10%. Well, that 10% gets split, where half of the tags are going to be allocated based on the person with the most points, which is a preference point system. So everybody goes into that draw first, and were you one of the top point holders? If so, you get a tag. If not, you don't get a tag, and then you go to the second part of the draw, where the remaining 50% of the tags are drawn and allocated based on a bonus point system. It's kind of like a raffle. So it's a true hybrid. I think Utah is one of the first states to come up with this hybrid system like this. And you're going to pay an upfront cost. You're going to pay $72 for your non-refundable hunting license in Utah. And then you're going to pay an application fee for each of the species. Now, if you draw, they'll hit your credit card later. So unlike New Mexico, you don't have to front a ton of money. If you draw, yeah, their fees are pretty high for non-residents, but most people would argue that it's worth it. So I say all this, and then I'm going to say, but the exception is. The exception is they have something called general deer tags, which in your mind you say, general deer tag, I should be able to buy that over the counter. No, you have to draw for it, and that goes on a preference point system. But everything else other than general deer goes on a hybrid system where half of them are on a preference point and the other half are on a bonus point system. The deadline is usually early March, so don't miss that deadline. If you fall behind in points in Utah, it's very, very costly. There's a lot of people in the Utah system, and you don't want to lose your place in line. The species they have, I would say Utah probably has more species to hunt than probably any state. Shivers moose, desert bighorn, Rocky Mountain bighorn, bison, mountain goat, elk, mule deer, black bear, mountain lion. I mean, it's crazy how many species you can apply for in Utah. And lots and lots of public land. Definitely worth your time if you can fit it in your budget. When you look at how low the draw odds for non-residents are, maybe you'll say, that upfront cost isn't worth it. If you have the budget, it's certainly worth it. Wyoming is one of those states that came along with a preference point system that is a hybrid system. So, kind of like Utah has half their tags on a preference point and the other half on a bonus point, Wyoming is a little bit like that, where 75% of the tags are on a preference point system and 25% are on a random system, not a bonus point system. So, exempted from the point systems are bison and mountain goat. Every other species, we're talking about a point system where there's some random tags, but the majority of them are going to be based on the number of points you have. Wyoming has a cap, a non-resident cap, but it's a very generous cap. I think moose, goat, and sheep, 25% of the tags go to non-residents. That's super generous. Antelope, I think it's as high as 40% in some units. Limited entry elk, I think is 16%. I know it's 16%. And I think deer might be 30%. So Wyoming is super generous to non-residents as far as their allocation of tags. If you look at how this, I'm going to talk about the deer, elk, and antelope draw. And it has two pieces to it. And I'm going to try and make this simplified. But Wyoming, when they started this point system, said, we're going to have some of the points, or some of the tags go to just the regular price. And then we're going to have a much higher price pool that are probably going to give people better draws, because most people aren't willing to pay that big extra chunk of money. And I'm talking deer, elk, and antelope here. So 60% of the tags go in what they call the regular draw. 40% go in what they call the special draw, and that is a much more expensive draw for all the species, for elk, deer, and antelope. So once we split these non-resident pools between the regular draw, 60% here, and the special draw, 40% here, then it gets split once again. So the second split is between the number of tags that are going to go in a preference point draw and the number of tags that are going to go in the random draw. So I'm just going to use an example. Let's say there's 100 tags for a hunt coat, 100 non-resident tags. There's very few that have 100 non-resident tags, but the math works good. So we're going to first split that 60-40. 60% of the tags are going to go in the regular draw, and 40% of the tags, or 40, are going in the special draw. Now over here in the regular draw, that 60 tags get split 75%, or 45 of them, in a preference point draw, where he or she with the most points gets the tag. And then the other 25%, or 15 of those tags, are going in a random draw. And then they do the same thing over here in the special draw. 75% of those 40 tags, or 30 of them, are going in a preference point draw. And then the other 25%, or 10 tags, are going in a random draw. And the sequence works like this for both pools of tags. Everybody goes in the preference point draw. If you have 0 points or maximum points, you go in that draw. And if you don't draw there, everybody gets thrown over into the random draw. And when we go in the random draw, we disregard points. So if you got 15 points and I got 0 points, once we get thrown over into the random draw, you and I are on equal footing. So there's always a chance you can draw in the Wyoming drawing. And then for their Shiras moose and their Rocky Mountain Bighorn, again, it's a 75-25, where 75% of the tags are on the preference point system, but yet they have a random portion. And so you might draw one of those random tags if you're applying for moose, or bighorn sheep. Now they have staggered deadlines for every species, and this is where life gets a little complicated in Wyoming. Beyond this split I just tried to explain, their elk deadline is usually the last day of January. So don't miss that. You got to be paying attention. Elk is their first thing out of the gate. And then in late February, they have their deadline for sheep, for mountain goat, and for Shiras moose. And then they have a bison deadline just shortly after that. And then their deer and antelope deadline is usually the end of May. So Wyoming has multiple draws going on. And if you want to be in their system, you have to be paying attention. Now, most states, when you're unsuccessful, you get a point. Wyoming, if you're unsuccessful, you don't automatically get a point. You have to come back into their system starting July 1st, and they usually have the point purchase system open for 3 or 4 months. You got to come back later and buy your point for the next year. If you draw a tag and your points get set to 0, you can't come and buy a point because you were successful that year. But don't forget to go and buy your point when the point system opens up in July. Now, Wyoming is going to not charge you a non-resident license fee, but they make you front all of the costs. So by the time you get done applying for elk and deer and antelope, and if you then jump in for moose and goat and bison and sheep, you have fronted a pile of money to Wyoming. And they add a 2.5% transaction fee plus an application fee on top of all of that. So there can be some pretty big sunk costs in Wyoming, even though they don't charge you an upfront license cost. So be thinking about that, as Wyoming is like really great hunting, lots of public land, great age class, but to build points, you're going to be paying quite a bit of money. The species we have in Wyoming, like I said, Shiras moose, Rocky Mountain bighorn, mountain goat, bison, deer, elk, the best antelope population in the world, black bear, and wolves. So lots and lots of species to hunt in Wyoming, tons of public land. They have a public access program called the Walk-In Hunting Program, or the Hunter Management Area Program. Those are places that allow you to go hunt some of the private lands. And Wyoming is just, it's a great state. They manage things really well. You just got to be on the ball, and you got to have a bit of a budget to front all of those costs that you're going to be paying up front. So that gets us through all of these states in overview, and I didn't even scratch the surface on any of them. And when you get to short-term, long-term, or mid-term plans and strategies, each of these states probably give you a little bit of an option of both. I'll use Wyoming. That would be a short-term plan for deer, possibly elk, and for sure antelope. But if you want to apply for some of the harder draw tags, I could make a case that deer, elk, and antelope in Wyoming is a midterm, like 5 to 9 year strategy. And if you want to go for the absolute cream of the crop, I could make the case that Wyoming is a long-term strategy. Now, when we're talking bighorn sheep, desert bighorn sheep, Shiras moose, or mountain goat, every one of those species, bison, those are all long-term. Make those your long-term plans. Don't plan on getting lucky and hunting those in the first, 4 years, or even the first 10 years. Now, when we go through all of these states, the same with Colorado, I could make the case that just like Wyoming, that could be short-term, mid-term, or long-term, depending on what unit you want to apply for. And I bring these examples up in the notion that you're making an investment in these states, in this strategy, in this plan. Have a budget and say, all right, what's my goal as far as the time horizon? And every state will have a slightly different short-term opportunity. There's some states, like I would say Utah, probably has no short-term opportunities for non-residents. Some would say Utah doesn't even have any mid-term opportunities for non-residents. It's all long-term. So when you're making your investment, be thinking about this. And if you want more detail, go to every state's website that you're interested in. And then if you really want the details, go to this place. It's called gohunt.com. Sign up for their insider. And it has all of this in such level of depth and detail you can't even believe it. It's crazy. But when you go there and sign up for the insider, use promo code Randy. They'll give you a $50 gift card. And mostly, become a member of the Wild Sheep Foundation. Put more sheep on the mountain. Get out and go hunting this year. Thanks for watching.